In this video we are going to talk about all you need to know about the history of Taliban till today. So before starting this video, please like this video and subscribe to this channel for our future updates. Taliban, often called Taliban, is an ultra-conservative political and religious group that arose in Afghanistan in the mid-1990s after the withdrawal of Soviet forces, the collapse of Afghanistan's communist system, and the consequent breakdown of civil order. The group got its name from its membership, which was mostly made up of students who had been schooled in madrasas, Islamic religious institutions, that had been set up for Afghan refugees in northern Pakistan in the 1980s. The beginning and the rule. In the southern Afghan province of Kandahar, the Taliban emerged as a force for social order in 1994, easily subduing the local warlords who governed the country's south. By late 1996, the Taliban had gained effective control of Afghanistan thanks to popular support from Afghanistan's southern Pashtun ethnic group, as well as help from hardline Islamic organizations outside. Non-Pashtun ethnic groups in the north, west, and central sections of the nation continued to resist the Taliban, particularly the Tajik, Uzbek, and Hazara, who perceived the Taliban's control as a continuation of the country's traditional Pashtun predominance. Except for a small part of northern Afghanistan, the Taliban controlled the whole country by 2001. Only Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates ever recognized the Taliban's social policies, which included the near-total exclusion of women from public life, including employment and education, the systematic destruction of non-Islamic artistic relics, as in the town of Bamiyan, and the imposition of harsh criminal punishments. More importantly, the Taliban allowed Afghanistan to become a refuge for Islamic extremists from all over the world, including an exiled Saudi Arabian named Osama bin Laden, who was accused of coordinating multiple terrorist operations against American interests as the leader of al-Qaeda. Following the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C. on September 11, 2001, the Taliban's reluctance to extradite bin Laden to the United States triggered a military conflict with the U.S. and allied nations. See September 11 attacks, Afghanistan War. The Taliban were deposed as a result of this insurgency and tenacity. In the years following the Taliban's defeat, the insurgency against U.S. and NATO forces continued. The Taliban's activities were mostly funded by a robust opium trade, which reached new highs several years after the Taliban's fall. Despite being driven out of Kandahar by the assault, Taliban commander Mullah Muhammad Omar is said to have continued to lead the insurgency from an undisclosed location. Some speculated that he was in Pakistan, but the Taliban denied this. The Afghan government discovered in July 2015 that Omar had died at a Pakistani hospital in 2013. Mullah Akhtar Mansur was named as his successor, but in May 2016, he was killed in a U.S. airstrike in Pakistan. Later that month, Hibatullah Akhundzada assumed command, however his function was mostly limited to the political and religious sectors. The Taliban's militant wing came increasingly under the control of the Haqqani network, whose commander Sirajuddin acted as the Taliban's deputy leader. Meanwhile, the Taliban's persistent tenacity and Afghanistan's central government's inability to exercise control across the country encouraged the government to pursue reconciliation with the Taliban. Officials under President Hamid Karzai had met informally with Taliban leaders, but it was under President Ashraf Ghani that the first formal contact was made. The Taliban, on the other hand, maintained to regard the central government as inherently illegitimate and demanded discussions with the foreign entity that had placed it, the U.S. The Taliban's resurgence and the United States' exit from Afghanistan. In 2018, the Taliban and the U.S. met for the first time, with the support of Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates, the only countries with diplomatic ties to both groups. The focus of the conversations was on the departure of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. However, the U.S. wanted to eventually persuade the Taliban to negotiate with the Afghan government. For the first time in July 2019, the meetings included central government officials, who agreed with Taliban representatives on fundamental principles for future reconciliation talks. Although the Taliban's delegates were not allowed to negotiate in an official capacity by the group, observers saw the encounter as a successful icebreaker. When a U.S. military man was murdered in an attack by the Taliban in Kabul in early September, the US and the Taliban had apparently reached an agreement in principle and were narrowing down on the terms of a signed contract. Days later, the US cancelled off a secret meeting between top US and Taliban officials, blaming the cancellation on the attack. In late February 2020, a deal was reached. The Taliban committed to initiate talks with the central government within 10 days of signing the agreement, as well as to prohibit al-Qaeda and the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant, ISIL, also known as the Islamic State of Iraq in Syria, ISIS, from functioning in Afghanistan. The US, for its part, will gradually withdraw its troops from the country over the next 14 months. Troop reductions began in March. Negotiations between the Taliban and the central government resumed on September 12 after a delay caused by the central government's unwillingness to carry out a prisoner swap promised to the Taliban by the US. However, by April 2021, the negotiations had made little headway. Despite this, the US reiterated its commitment to complete the troop withdrawal, albeit the timeline was pushed out from May to September. The Taliban, emboldened by the retreat, quickly seized several Afghan districts by late June and set their sights on provincial capitals. Despite the fact that the Taliban lacked the manpower and firepower to hold off the central government's larger and better equipped armed forces, the latter's lack of coordination and responsiveness to the insurgency allowed the Taliban to overrun the country in months. By the middle of August, the Taliban had taken control of practically the whole country, including Kabul. Maulawi Hibatullah Akhundzada, a senior religious priest from the Taliban's founding generation, is in charge of the organization. Mullah Akhtar Muhammad Mansur, the Taliban's former commander, was killed in a US airstrike in Pakistan in 2016, and he was announced as the group's new head in 2016. The new Taliban leader, according to Thomas Ruddig of the Afghanistan Analysts Network, may be able to integrate the younger and more militant generation. Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, a co-founder of the Taliban who was detained in Karachi, Pakistan's largest city, in 2010, was freed in 2013. Baradar, who chairs the organization's political committee, recently met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Many observers, however, are concerned that a return to Taliban control would mean a return to the Afghanistan of 2 decades ago, when women's rights were severely curtailed. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to escape as a result of gross human rights violations, according to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. He stated that, international humanitarian law and human rights, particularly the hard-won gains of women and girls, must be safeguarded. The Taliban did not want Afghanistan to become a pariah state, according to Amin Saikal, author of Modern Afghanistan, A History of Struggle and Survival. They have not really changed in terms of their ideological commitment, Saikal remarked. Why did the Taliban have such a stronghold over Afghan forces? The US has spent over $1 trillion in Afghanistan over the last 2 decades. It offered modern equipment and training to Afghan army and police officers. According to a United Nations Security Council report released in June, Afghan forces totaled 308,000 soldiers as of February, much exceeding the estimated number of armed Taliban members, which ranged from 58,000 to 100,000. The Afghan army, on the other hand, ultimately proved ineffective against the Taliban. Carter Malkasian, a former senior assistant to the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff and author of The American War in Afghanistan, A History, stated Afghan forces struggled with coordination and morale at times. The Taliban became more confident when their morale deteriorated as a result of their defeats. Afghan forces have had morale and motivation to tackle the Taliban issues for a long time, he said. The Taliban may portray themselves as individuals who are resisting and battling occupation, which is something that is very close to Afghan identity. That is a lot more difficult assertion for the administration or the government's military forces to make. The Taliban spokesman, Shaheen, said the military offensive's success had not surprised them. Because we have roots among the people, he explained. Because it was a popular rebellion of the people, he added. No one, however, took us seriously. And now that they've seen it, they've been taken aback because they hadn't expected it. Only a month ago, senior Biden administration officials predicted that the civilian government in Kabul would take months to fall. Now, senators are putting pressure on the Biden administration to provide answers and details on how U.S. intelligence could have misunderstood the situation on the ground so severely. The situation has been dubbed a unmitigated disaster of epic proportions by Texas Representative Michael McCall, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, while Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said, "Everyone saw this coming, except the president, who publicly and confidently dismissed these threats just a few weeks ago." Despite laying out a strategy for doing so during his discussions with Biden and other senior U.S. leaders, American officials have expressed dismay at the now-defunct U.S.-backed Afghan government's inability to safeguard major towns and regions from the Taliban. The Taliban's lack of pushback from Afghan forces has been highly disturbing, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin stated. "They had all the advantages," he added, according to sources on the conversation when he made the statements. "They had 20 years of training by our coalition troops, a sophisticated air force, good equipment and weaponry. Willpower and leadership, on the other hand, cannot be purchased." And that's exactly what this situation lacked. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks for watching.